Welcome to video number 6 in my 13-part video series. The 13 big mistakes that beginning saxophonists make and even experienced saxophonists make that prevent them from moving up to the next level or prevent them from even getting started. So, video number 6 is a huge one. Assuming playing the saxophone is easy. Now, I hinted at this at video number 4 when I talk about understanding your instrument. Now, this probably is one of the biggest impediments after fear of getting started that prevents people from becoming proficient, great saxophonists. And here's the problem. There is a massive assumption that playing the saxophone is easy. This is further compounded by the fact that of all the instruments taught and examined by the Associated Board of the Royal Schools of Music, which I refer to as the ABRSM exams, this saxophone is the one where you can make the greatest progress very quickly. You can go from being a beginner saxophonist and pass your grade 8 in literally 2.5 years. That means you're writing an examination every single third, which is how the Associated Board examines. Because you can make a rapid progress in the beginning of playing the instrument, most people believe the saxophone is easy. It's a false lead, to be fair. Because of the idiosyncrasies, quirks of the instrument with the conical bore, reminding you once again, if you didn't see the other videos, you need to go back and see those videos. The conical bore is that over here it's thin, it's fat over here. There's a cone. That is why the bore is conical. Because of that, intonation on the instrument, even playing the top keys, which is your D, E, F sharp, E flat, at the top of the instrument, even playing the middle D consistently is a problem because of the certain quirks which you get with the instrument. However, what is a big problem is that with most people who learn the saxophone, there is a massive assumption that this is a very easy instrument to play. I've even heard people who should know better claim it's an easy instrument to play, and this is simply not true. The easier instruments to play, and this is just in my opinion because I don't really believe there's truly an easy instrument to play, but the ones which are easier, more or less, is stuff like piano. Even though the piano is legendary for the fact that 90% of people start the piano quit it. Because if you push down a key on the piano, the sound is more or less consistent. Yes, there are many amazing things you can do with the way you touch it. I've heard pianists who play the piano with chords which make it sound like they're plucking a harp, but that is just technique. But generally speaking, you push the key down on the piano, it plays. There is a very little variation between how you push the key down and the rest. You can't really change the tuning. The note is consistent. What you're changing is the speed at which you hit it and certain little nuances in terms of speed, force, touch as you're playing the instrument. However, with the piano, because it's consistently, if you've got a tune down pat, in other words, you've memorized a particular tune, a particular chord progression, which sounds nice on a song, if you apply this consistently over all pianos, it will more or less sound the same. Saxophone, this is not true, unfortunately, because in the saxophone, a huge amount of this depends on your ability to understand and hear the pitches accurately. Intonation refers to the ability to hear and play a note in tune. The word of tuning and all this is a whole other conundrum. Again, this is something which evolved. And I'm not going to go into detail. However, bearing in mind that I understand that there will be many more questions which are opened up by even mentioning intonation and tuning, I have prepared a blog post and a video which you shall see referenced here. You can kind of see the reference. You can click, you find there's something over there, at the top part of the video. You can click through to my blog post where I speak about this intonation issues, my understanding of intonation and the rest. But bearing in mind, to put it in very simple terms, it means that how you hear a song will vary greatly depending how it's played and by which saxophone it's played. Now, getting correct intonation means the song sounds right. Now, again, I don't want to give you an even more scientific explanation because that's simply it. If you hear it and you feel, okay, that sounds right. Sometimes you hear it and you feel it sounds a bit dull. That means it's too flat. But being slightly sharp is not necessarily a bad thing because it gives a brightness to the sound. All this means that playing the saxophone is really quite difficult when it comes to the ideas of intonation and getting stuff proper. In fact, going on to very advanced saxophone techniques requires a level of discipline which you have to develop, which most saxophonists don't even get to. And what I mean is this: being able to play very quickly on the saxophone is really a matter of being able to hold your hands and to minimize finger movement. Stuff like altissimo is a very advanced technique. And I use the word very advanced because many people play altissimo incorrectly. The tones sound harsh, forced. And bear in mind, doing that is doing damage to your throat. You will pay for it later in life. So with that in mind, it's important to take this idea. To play the saxophone well, you must first get rid of this idea that it's an easy instrument to play. I tell you this because the number of guys I've heard, the two instruments which older gentlemen suffering from midlife crisis want to take up are guitar and saxophone. Many switch to from playing the saxophone to the guitar because they say they find the guitar easier. I personally have tried playing the guitar. I don't find playing the guitar easy at all. I actually prefer playing the saxophone, but then again, I'm biased. I learned how to play the saxophone. But playing the guitar, I find moving, your fingers down that fretboard and the strumming thing and all, that doesn't work well for me. So I've never really seriously investigated playing the guitar because the first time I played it, I didn't find it easy. However, playing the saxophone is found difficult for them because of what they believe is possible. So they will hear Charlie Parker solo, and they'll believe just with a few practices here and there, hit and miss, after reading through the cryptic Jamie Abersold books. If you've ever read through Jamie Abersold's stuff, I'm telling you right now, he assumes a level of proficiency and understanding of music theory and musicianship which the most amateur musicians don't have. Because the people who buy his books aren't pros, they're amateurs. And after reading a few Abersold books, watching a few YouTube videos, they go and buy a high-end saxophone using Yamaha Yanagisawa. High-end saxophones start for a price of £2,500, which is a significant amount of money. And they believe they can now start playing like Charlie Parker after a few hit and miss practices. It does not happen. What Charlie Parker plays is very advanced, not just from a musician's point of view or saxophonist's point of view, but also even from the amount of hearing and understanding you must have in the ear and understanding of music theory to play at that speed. Even the demands of a saxophonist are great. Charlie Parker plays at tempi of 300 beats per minute or more. So playing at that speed is difficult for most people. It's also difficult if you have never learned how to play at just 40 beats per minute, which most of these guys haven't. So as a result of this, they quit. And when they try to sell the saxophones, they find it's very difficult to sell a high-end horn when you've bought it to people. Not many people want to buy it. And if they want to buy it, they want a significant discount. Telling them stories like, oh, I just only bought it last week, ain't gonna cut it. So if you've bought the saxophone for £2,500, it's highly likely to let it go. You're going to have to sell it for £2,100 or £2,000. Now, the truth is, this comes because of an incorrect understanding of how to learn the saxophone. Number one, you need to realize that it takes 2 years to sound good on the saxophone. This is important because that's why I say that piano and guitar aren't a problem. You just play piano and guitar for about 6 months, you put your hand on it, you sound good. Guitar, just strumming them simple chords. Look how many guys, look at these guys. What are these guys called? One Direction. One Direction, the music ain't complicated. It's just some pretty white boys, doing the boy band thing, and women are flocking to them, right? No, none of this is difficult. The majority of songs which people find pretty on the guitar are actually very simple to play from a technical standpoint. However, the important thing is that when you play the guitar from day one, you more or less will sound good. You may not sound fantastic, but you sound good enough to be passable to the average layman. Saxophone, you will sound terrible for 2 years. This is the truth. I say 2 years, I give you more time than less. Because the truth is, if I tell you will sound terrible for 6 months, and after 6 months, you don't sound good, you quit. No, you need to give it as much as 2 years, sometimes more, till you get good. And then you can hear what you play much better. And you're just getting over the idiosyncrasies. Your body's getting used to playing the instrument. And that is how you're going to actually learn to play the saxophone. So because it takes that long before you sound great, many give up. Now, this is unrealistic. Even the top players And I often say this, and this is a very controversial view, but I can say this, I'm a black person. I think the truth is many people, because of the history they've read about most black jazz saxophonists, many assuming that they are niggers, some people may disagree with me for saying this, they believe that because these black guys had strange lives, multiple women, were difficult characters, they believe that playing the saxophone in the jazz idiom is easy. This is where the myth that playing the saxophone is easy has come from. I can assure you it has not come from classical saxophonists. The average amateur saxophonist cannot even name 2 classical saxophonists. They can't, because they have not been exposed to it. That is how unknown classical saxophonists are. So it must come from the idea that after learning about the lives and times of black jazz musicians, particularly black male jazz musicians, because jazz saxophone is literally being made by black jazz musicians and black male jazz musicians. From reading about this, they believe that because we're better from them, i.e. judging them, without really understanding where they're coming from morally and the rest, therefore it would be a simple thing for us to learn to play the saxophone. No, that is not true. What those guys did when they learned to play the saxophone is they really did do their work. It really is very difficult to play at that level. Even classical players who've gone and studied at a conservatoire still find it difficult to truly enunciate and play bebop correctly and play many of the jazz styles. Now, I say this because it is very easy to assume, because of what I believe is racial prejudice, that playing the saxophone is easy, particularly in the jazz idiom. This never happens classically. This is the truth. This is why I'm not even mentioning classically. No one who's been exposed to classical saxophone actually believes playing the saxophone is very easy. This is the truth, and classical saxophonists make a good job of making it difficult, or telling people it is more difficult than it really is. But the truth is, there is some work to be done. But the myth that playing the saxophone is easy actually comes from people analyzing and studying jazz saxophonists. One of the biggest myths as well is this idea that being self-taught is a good idea. Bear in mind, a lot of these guys were self-taught because of segregation. They couldn't get into a music conservatoire because they were black. They didn't qualify to get into a music conservatoire because their playing ability wasn't that good at the time of entering it when they were teenagers. So because of all this is the reason they were self-taught. No one ever told you being self-taught on an instrument is a good idea. And I know that there are many guys out there selling it. I know guys are selling millions of pounds worth of products online, telling people to go and learn the saxophone on their own. Right? Now, don't get me wrong. I have my own course, the Play Sax Now Basics course, in which I'm teaching you how to have basic skills of playing the saxophone by learning it via self-teaching. However, I still offer comprehensive teaching and one-to-one support as well as retreats, because I realize that it is not necessarily a good idea for the majority of people to learn to play the saxophone on their own. This is the truth. They have a hard time of it, and when they start to come up with techniques or they start to get it right, a lot of what they're doing is wrong. It's actually dangerous for their own health because of the way they play. To tell you the variation, I once played with an Afro jazz player, and I started with Fanyana Dube, the great Afro jazz saxophonist from Zimbabwe, where I'm from. And he did not know what the bell keys were on the saxophone. These are the bell keys. They're controlled, these ones here. If I actually see, these are the bell keys. Right? He didn't know what these were. He could never find the table. And he'd played his whole life that. I have a saxophonist here in my local area of Romford in Essex, where there's a guy who plays out of the side of his mouth. That's an incorrect technique. That's not a proper way of playing, but he gets away with doing it. So there are many strange things that you will see. So, firstly, what you should get out of this video. 1, playing the saxophone is not easy. It may seem easy because in the beginning it seems you're getting things right, but trust me, when you actually sit down and analyze what you're doing wrong, you ain't going to be happy. In fact, the majority of people I see who come to me for help are saxophonists who've been playing for a while, who've hit the glass ceiling, and have come to me because they cannot make further progress. Hence, they've had to seek lessons because they're realizing this just isn't working. Or they think they are the business because they've been self-taught. They go to a workshop or some sort of masterclass and are painfully embarrassed by a grizzled pro who's taking this, who shows them just how poor their technique and playing is. So hence, they have to seek out help. Number 2, the myth that playing the saxophone is easy mainly comes from the jazz world, not the classical world. Because To put it plainly, jazz music, particularly jazz saxophone music, it was played by black males who weren't well regarded. Even now, I don't think people still regard black people very well, despite the fact that President Obama has come and gone. As a result of that, most people believe that playing at that high level, bebop and other forms of saxophone is simple. It is not. In fact, to put it quite bluntly, it might be better for you to learn to play classically first before going there, because at least in classical, you learn all the techniques which are extended into jazz. Thirdly, it's important to realize, to come with the attitude that you're going to sound bad for a while before you really start to learn the saxophone. So that means that a minimum of 2 years, you're going to sound terrible before you start to play proficiently. Don't let anybody else tell you any differently. The fact is, because you have to get used to playing the instrument, get used to concepts such as embouchure, being able to hear and form notes on the saxophone, you're probably going to sound terrible for as long as 2 years until it gets there. Because of that 2-year period, that makes the saxophone a difficult instrument to play. Unlike the piano or guitar, because of the way they are pitched, you can just lay your hands on them and virtually within 3 to 6 months, you sound good. I'm not saying you sound great, but you're passable. You can play simple songs, people can clap. The saxophone does not work that way. There is this period of time where you will sound terrible until you're able to get things together. Now, this period of time can be greatly reduced with proper teaching and the rest, but even then, a good year needs to be put in, playing it daily and consistently until you start to hear nuances and feel nuances in the way you're playing the instrument. Now, it's critical that you understand this one. This is why this video is quite long, because not understanding this is where people go wrong, right? And fourthly, the best way to approach, and this is in my humble opinion, and more importantly, in understanding the saxophone, is start from a classical perspective, then go into a jazz perspective. The reason I say this is very simple. The jazz has this problem that it sounds simple, right? Not only that, the concept, the way that jazz musicians operate, and this is an important point, is that they're cool, it seems simple. The truth is, what they do is very complex and hard. So it is easier for you to start from a classical perspective and ease into playing jazz than the other way around. Everybody seems to argue with me, but I've looked at many different jazz perspectives, including the Aebersold books, in which he assumes a high level of proficiency. Remember that Jamie Aebersold's books are the top-selling books on how to improvise and play jazz, and have been for over 40 years. So when I look at it, and bearing in mind, I'm an experienced musician, I have got my music theory down, I understand my musicianship, I get a headache just reading through his book. And I think to myself, if I, as a music teacher who's guiding others, do this, what of the layman who doesn't know all the stuff that I know? So it's always a problem when you actually get to it. So I would always say, start from maybe a certain classical perspective. I'm not saying follow it fully, as you'll see when I explain in my following videos, but at least you will get somewhere quicker than when did you go into the deep end of jazz. And the problem with most people when they come to the saxophone, particularly, and the majority of people come to play it in the jazz perspective, is they want to play bebop day one. No, bebop is not day one. Bebop is day 1,000, day 2,000, because of the nature of what the music is. So as a result of that, they don't really realize what they're getting themselves into. So I hope you found a lot of information in this video. It's one of the few videos I say you should rewatch and to fully understand. Yes, some of you may disagree with my view on it, but the fact is this: the majority of people do not get to a high level of playing the saxophone because they assume it's easy. And when hard things come their way, instead of breaking through them and pushing through this, they quit. Because they say, oh, well, I mean, it's obviously someone is making it harder than it really is. No, really and truly, there is that 2-year period in the beginning where you're going to sound bad, and you have to go through that 2-year period before you start to get to another level. And there will always be peaks and troughs as you're going to learn the instrument, because that's the nature of learning a woodwind instrument, particularly one with as iconic and as complex as the saxophone. So I thank you very much for actually seeing this video. Put your comments, your likes and everything below. I'll read them and get back to you. Now I want to get on to the next video, which will be video number 7 in my series, which is a big one. And this one is staying in one musical genre for too long. Again, people say it may be a contradiction what I said. Don't worry, I'll explain in the next video. But staying in one musical genre for too long. So I look forward to seeing you in video number 7, which is staying in one musical genre for too long, or only learning one musical genre for too long. And remember to play your sax now.